Alright, well hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is James, and here at 20th and 21st Movies we cover all things cinema. So if you're interested in movies across all genres going back to the early 1920s all the way up to current day, this is the place for you. So this is the first video in my Taste of Director series, where I'm going to talk about a specific director and cover 3 films from that director's filmography. So in this first video, I'm going to cover Mr. Stanley Kubrick. So this is A Taste of Kubrick. And Stanley Kubrick is one of my favorite directors of all time. He was an absolute master or maestro of cinema. And I love so many of the movies that he made in his career. So a little bit about Stanley Kubrick. He was born in Manhattan, New York City in July of 1928. So at a young age, he was exposed to and developed a real affinity for chess and photography. And apparently those passions for chess and for photography made their way into his filmmaking, into the films that he made over his career. So Kubrick directed 13 feature films, starting in 1951 with 2 short films called Flying Padre and Day of the Flight, up to Eyes Wide Shut, which came out in 1999 and starred Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman. That was his last film. So a filmography that spanned nearly 5 decades. So just an incredible achievement for Stanley Kubrick. And one of the things I love about Stanley Kubrick is the diversity of films he put out. He put out films from many genres. Horror genre, war films, he put out a period piece, he put out science fiction movies, he put out quirky films like A Clockwork Orange. So he touched on so many different areas and gave us so many memorable characters over the years. Alright, so for Taste of Kubrick, I'm going to cover 3 films from his filmography. These are 3 films that I love tremendously. I love a lot of Kubrick's films, but these are the 3 films I'm going to focus on in this Taste of Kubrick. Alright, so the 3 films from Kubrick that I'm going to cover are 1964's Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, which is a great film. 1968's 2001 A Space Odyssey, one of the greatest science fiction movies of all time. And 1987's Full Metal Jacket, which, as you can see, is on the menu there on the TV. A tremendous, tremendous war film. Stanley Kubrick did a number of war films, including Paths of Glory, and this was his last war film. Tremendous film. Okay, after a swig of coffee here, I'm going to talk about Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. This was a film that came out in 1964, and what's really interesting about this film is that this was one of 2 films that came out in the same year that dealt with the fear and paranoia around the Cold War that was very hot and heavy at that time. 1964 was not too far removed from the Cuban Missile Crisis early in John F. Kennedy's administration, where America and the world came so close to nuclear conflict, a time of tremendous fear around the Cold War, around the prospect of nuclear war, and just all of the fears and tensions that surround that. So the other film that came out in 1964 that also dealt with the Cold War paranoia is a film called Failsafe, which was directed by Sidney Lumet. Now Failsafe took a more serious approach to the subject matter. This film is highly satirical. It's more of a comedy. This film stars Peter Sellers and George C. Scott in a pretty much a laugh-out-loud satirical take on the Cold War. This film is very satirical. It's more of a comedy with Peter Sellers playing 3 roles in the film, George C. Scott playing an over-the-top general, and it deals with the prospect of a general that goes just off the farm, orders a nuclear attack on Russia. And Peter Sellers plays the president, and he has his people in the war room, and they're trying to figure out how to stop this bomber from essentially starting a nuclear war. And so this film takes a very satirical, funny, humorous take on it. Hayden is in this. He plays a crazy role. It's laugh out loud, it's funny, it's just zany. You also have James Earl Jones in this film. He plays one of the crew members on the bomber that's going on this mission to drop this bomb in Russia. And so it's just a crazy, crazy film that I highly recommend. This is a great addition by Criterion, and I can't recommend it enough. Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. So this is a great film from Kubrick from 1964. Also, it's important to note that Dr. Strangelove won the BAFTA Award for Best Film. So that's a nice little factoid about this particular movie. All right, so the second film I'm going to cover from Kubrick came out 4 years after Dr. Strangelove, and it's Kubrick's science fiction epic. It's his magnum opus, if you would. And it's a film that pretty much everybody knows about. It's called 2001: A Space Odyssey, 1968. This is one of the great films of all time. 2001: A Space Odyssey is considered one of the greatest science fiction films ever made. This film actually earned Kubrick his only Academy Award win. He won the Academy Award for special effects, special visual effects for this film, and that award was richly earned. The effects in this film were amazing for the time, and they still look pretty good today. Visually speaking, this 4K Ultra HD edition is a sight to behold. If you do not own this 4K edition of this film and you love this film, you absolutely must get this release. 2001: A Space Odyssey is an incredible, epic space odyssey, if you would, that I'm not going to go into the plot, but it covers going back to the beginning of time, to the early days of mankind, all the way up to current day. Then it goes a millennia into the future. So it is epic in its scale and its scope, and the visuals are a sight to behold. The music is intoxicating. It's a classical score that plays throughout most of the film, and it's very meditative in nature. And this is the kind of film that you just want to just sit back and just let it wash over you. It's just one of the greatest science fiction epics of all time, and I highly recommend it. And one of the greatest films from the great Stanley Kubrick, 2001: A Space Odyssey. Another swig of coffee. Not bad. All right, so the last film that I'll cover in this Taste of Kubrick video is a film from 1987 that is a war epic, one of the great war films that's ever been made, and one of Kubrick's best films in my opinion. It's Full Metal Jacket, and as you can see here, that's the menu back there for the 4K Blu-ray. This is a tremendous film that stars Matthew Modine as Private Joker, Ermey as the famous sergeant, drill sergeant in the Marines. He famously played that role where he gave his recruits a very difficult time. I'm not sure if you can see that, but he was epic in this movie. This is just one of the great war films that's ever been made. I cannot really say enough about how incredible it is. So this film is almost like two movies in one. You sort of have that first part where you have the basic training where the new recruits are being broken in and literally broken by this drill sergeant played by Ermey. That's for the first 45 minutes. After that, it takes you to Vietnam and Matthew Modine and the other soldiers' time in the war theater. Stanley Kubrick's Full Metal Jacket is the real deal for war movies. It is highly recommended on so many levels. This 4K Ultra HD disc is, I think, a great picture overall. When you look at both parts of the film, the very beginning, the boot camp period, looks pretty good. It looks a little bit better when you get to the war theater in Vietnam, but both aspects of the movie look really, really good in 4K Ultra HD. All right, so it looks as good as it's ever looked on 4K, but I will say as a point of comparison, if you compare these two releases, this film from 1968 in 4K, and this film from 1987 in 4K, I will tell you that although this does look good, this film looks better. This film that's almost 20 years older looks better in 4K than this 1987 film. So this 1968 film absolutely is dazzling in 4K. It looks incredible. If you did not know this film was over 50 years old, you wouldn't know that it was a 50-year-old movie. This film here looks good, but not as good as this film here. So just keep that in mind, that with some of these 4K transfers and the restoration work, it just depends on the elements and how the films were shot. And I don't know all the technical aspects of it, but I do know that that for some of these releases, such as 2001: A Space Odyssey, looks absolutely fantastic in 4K. I also happen to have Spartacus, which is another Stanley Kubrick film, released in 4K, and that film looks absolutely amazing in 4K. And this, I think it came out in 1960, so they're doing a great job restoring these films in many cases, especially these catalog titles, and I just hope they keep up the work. All right, so there you have it. That's my Taste of Kubrick. This is my first in this series, A Taste of Directors series. So let me know in the comments below what you think about this format. What do you think about the films that I covered? What do you think about Dr. Strangelove, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Full Metal Jacket? Have you seen these films? What do you think about these films? What are some other films from Stanley Kubrick's filmography that you would recommend that people watch? Stanley Kubrick directed so many tremendous films that you really can't cover it all. And that's sort of the beauty of this Taste of Directors series. Is the purpose is not to cover everything about a particular director. The purpose is to just give a taste of, to give a flavor of that director's work. And as always, thanks for joining, and we'll see you next time at the movies. Peace.